to Noah with regard to the ark and the big sea voyage? What are some of the special instructions? Well, Peggy, age 10, says, don't hammer too loud, you'll wake up the heavens. All right? Another one, this is a great one. Brett, age 11, said this, just build the ark, Noah, and the animals will come. Trust me. That was the instructions from God. Okay? Not sure where this came from, but Natalie, age 10, says this, no, Noah, you can't take your exercise equipment with you on the ark. This isn't a pleasure trip. All right? Not sure where exercising and pleasure come in, but that's all right. Another question asked, how did Noah and his family keep busy on the ark for 40 days and 40 nights? Well, Giorgio, age 9, says they held 3-legged and 4-legged races. All right? Christopher, age 10, says this, what did they do? Well, the same things they do on the carnival boats you see on TV, except they couldn't stay outside and get tans. All right? Now, some good ones here. When they were asked, well, how did Noah first discover that the waters had dried up enough for landing? Okay, here's what some of the kids said. How did he discover? Jeb, age 9, says this. Well, God left a sign that said, ready for landing, Noah. Park the boat right here. God. All right? That'd be a nice sign to have, right? Latoya, age 11, says this. Well, whenever the ship bumped into the shore and knocked everybody down, it was time to land. All right? A rainbow, this was from Emilio, age 7, a rainbow that was shaped like an arrow pointed to where the land was. And I don't know where Cody got this one, but Cody, age 12, says this. Noah hit a golf ball and it landed in a sand trap. That's how he knew. Another question asked, when they were finally off the ark, what were the first words out of Noah and his family? Finally off the ark, what's the first words? Barry, age 10, said this. Thank God we don't have to do this every year, right? Anita, age 7, says, well, that rainbow was pretty. I hope it doesn't have to rain again for 40 days and nights before we can see it again. Okay? Not happy. All right. Last question they asked was this. What did the rainbow symbolize? They asked all these kids, what did the rainbow symbolize for God in his communication with future generations? The rainbow. Well, Claire, age 10, says, well, that God was a supporter of drawing and the arts. That's what that, there you go. Sheila, age 9, says, a rainbow is a celebration in heaven. When it rains, God is crying. When it thunders, God's yelling at the angels. But a rainbow is more like a holiday. All right? And a good one, Janet, age 10, says this. Rainbows always mean everything is going to be okay from now on. You know? You look at the story of Noah, and it has impact. Across our world, across ages, it has impact. And we start looking at this. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 6. Where all this stuff, a lot of stuff takes place. And some of the verses will be on the screen, of course. But we're going to look at this story. And I only have 2 points today on this story. But there's some great things we can take away from the story of Noah and the ark. And the first one is this. Point number 1 is we're going to look at Noah the man. Okay, let's just look at Noah for a second. Who he was as the man. Because, guys, he lived in a very wicked world. He lived in a wicked world. I know we look around us and we look at our world and we watch the news at any evening of the week and we think and we know we live in a pretty stinking, wicked, ugly world. We do. I mean, just look at anything you want to read. There's stuff going on all the time that does not make sense to me of how this could go on. It's because of sin. But Noah lived in a world far more wicked than I think we can even imagine. I mean, let's read some of these verses. We go to Genesis 6, verse 5. It says this, the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth. Now get this, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. And the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. Man, that is some serious verses going on there. Because it says, even though when God created the world, he looked back, and after he created man, his greatest creation, he looked at everything and said it was very good. That was his initial response to the creation of man. Now, years later, it says he looked at men and he regretted that he had ever made human beings on the earth. And his heart was deeply troubled. It was so bad that God wanted to destroy everything. Every man, every woman, every child, every animal, every bug, every bird, all of it. He was angry. God was angry at the lack of concern for anything spiritual whatsoever. We talked about Cain and Abel last week, and we see how that started even right at the beginning, where sin just jumped in, and Satan jumped in and just confused and led astray the human race. And it didn't get any better. In fact, it got a lot worse. The Bible says that men's heart, their thoughts, every inclination of their mind were always on evil. Always. Never on godly things, only on evil things. Not one pure thought in all of mankind. Now you think about that and how serious that is. Here we are, we're sitting in church this morning, which tells me a little bit that at least we don't have only evil thoughts, because we walked in the doors to at least sing a little bit and worship a little bit and hear a little bit about God. So even then we know, even though our world is bad, it can be wicked, it is nothing like it was in Noah's time. You know, and when I've talked to people over the years about a relationship with Jesus Christ, and I've visited with them about entering into this relationship, I have been asked the question many times, well, if your God is so loving and so kind and so forgiving, how could he wipe out the entire earth in Noah? They go back to this story because they know about Noah. How could he wipe out everybody? And even if they don't believe in God or believe that there was a flood, they'll go back to this to use against you, to say, well, how could your God be that loving? How could you worship a God that says he could wipe out everybody? See, and the thing is, during this time it was evil. But guess what? God wasn't the one making the decisions. God wasn't making the choices. It was us. It was humankind. They were the ones making the decisions. They were the ones never thinking about God. See, just like today, God has given us the freedom of choice. You have the freedom to choose to do what's right, to choose to do what's wrong. You have the choice to choose God or not choose God. And so when it comes down to it, and you make a choice, and there are consequences to that choice, you can't blame God for your choices, even though we try to do that. God, how could you let this happen to me when I'm the one that made the choices in the first place? I mean, that's the bottom line, right? God wasn't making these choices. And I guarantee you, I wish, there are a lot of times in my life and in my ministry, I wish God was forcing us to follow him and to believe in him. It sure make my life a lot easier. If I knew that all you guys are going to follow God because he's going to make you believe and make you follow, that would make things a lot easier. But he doesn't want us that way. He doesn't want to treat us like puppets. He gives us the free will to choose him or not choose him. I mean, how nice would it be that you knew your kids were never going to do wrong because God was going to force them to do right all the time, right? I mean, they think about the difference that it would be, but that's not. God says, no, I want to give you free will. See, that's the thing. We have all been given free will. That opportunity to choose the direction that we want to follow. We've been given that opportunity. And I look back and I look at all the years I got to do ministry and did a lot of youth ministry, and I saw a lot of young people who did not make great choices all the time, as we all are young people at one time. We know how that goes. And I have conversations with them now, some years later. In fact, I was on my Facebook last week. I got a message from a kid who was in my youth group 20 years ago in Texas. And he got on and he was just wanting to catch up. He said, I hope you remember me. I said, of course I remember you. You were in trouble all the time, It was easy to remember him. And he said, yeah, now he's married. He's got 3 kids. He's trying to get his life right. But he looks back at that, and he looks back at the choices he made and the consequences he had, and he made some mistakes. And he's now to the point as an adult where he's not blaming anybody but himself. But see, that's not how it was then. We all struggle through these things. And see, here's the thing. God says, I want you to follow me. Follow me. Man, I'll give you direction. I'll give you the right way to live your life. But he doesn't say, okay, do what's right, and then step away and say, now guess at it. Okay, I want you to do what's right. I want you to follow me. Now just figure it out for yourself. No, he gives us his word. And in his word, he gives us instructions, he gives us boundaries, he gives us information, all these things to help us make right choices. The world at this time wasn't making any right choices. Our world struggles with right choices. And guys, we live in a tough world. And I've got 3 teenage daughters, all actually in here today, not helping in Sunday school. I got 3 teenage daughters, and I know that one of these stinking days, some boy's going to want to marry one of my girls, okay? And I'm just telling you right now, all boys are evil, all right? That's what it is. That's the life of it, okay? So, with that said, sorry boys that are in here, but that's how it's got to be right now in my life. And so I'm looking very far into the future, when these guys decide to marry some dude who thinks he's good enough for my girls, okay? And I know it's going to happen one day. He's going to come to me and ask permission to date my daughter. I want guys to ask my permission. You hear that? Any guy here wants to date my daughters? You got to ask my permission first, okay? And so with that said, and I've had one of these before, but one of our kind, grandmotherly ladies in here gave me something, and I changed around a little bit. The application for permission to date my daughter, okay? You may have seen these. I won't go through all the stuff that's on here, but it's a very nice form, okay? Any father in here can have copies later if you want one, if you have daughters, okay? And it says at the very beginning, note, please be prepared to submit additional information after this. In other words, a psychological profile, a DNA sample, and submission to a polygraph exam. All these would be good, okay? And it asks the normal stuff. It asks for name, and it asks for height, and date of birth, and IQ, and GPA. Those are both important, okay? It asks for the Social Security number and driver's license number so I can check up on them. I want their address. I want their Boy Scout rank because that's very important, okay? Got Boy Scout to make sure that they're running good. I want to know how fast this boy can run the 40 yards because I want to know if I can catch him or not, okay? I want to know how fast he can run 2 miles because I can always catch him in a car, all right? I know that. I want to know where they attend church, how often they go to church. I have 2 essay questions. One says, in 50 words or less, explain what this phrase means. Don't touch my daughter, all right? Another one says, in 50 words or less, explain what the word late means to you, all right? Now, there's some sentences they have to finish because I want to plan ahead here, okay? So complete the following sentences. It says, A, if I were to be shot, the last place I would want to be shot is in the, and they have to fill in the blank, okay? B, if I were to be beaten, the last bone I would want to be broken is, okay? It's all good to know. C, the one thing I hope this application does not ask is, all right? D, in the unfortunate event of my untimely death, I would like my ashes scattered, and they can fill in the blank, okay? And the last one is my greatest fear is, and I'm just going to go ahead and fill in my name right there, because that's where it should be, okay? That's what it should be. Another question says, what do you want to be if you grow up, all right? Have you ever been fingerprinted? Do you have any identifying marks? Any scars, tattoos, any place? And if yes, give the locations so I can know how I can hide it later, okay? Then it says, I hereby swear that all the information supplied above is true and correct to the best of my knowledge under penalty of death and dismemberment. And they sign it. And there's some fine print at the bottom, okay? It says, thank you for your interest. Please allow 4 to 6 years for processing. You will be contacted in writing if you are approved. Please do not call, write, email, text, Facebook, or in any other way try and contact my daughter during this time. Any attempt at contact during the processing of this application could be hazardous to your health and or cause serious personal injury, okay? So, we live in a world that's just crazy, all right? I mean, we do, and there is evilness that's out there. And if you're a parent, you know there's evil out there, and it scares you for your own kids. So you look back again at the world of Noah's time, and men had chosen to leave God completely. Not just here and there, not just mess up once in a while. No, completely they left God. It was their choice. And like we said, not one of their thoughts were on spiritual things. They were all evil. All but one, Noah. Here we get to Noah, who's living in this kind of a time period. I can't even fathom how he's living in this time period. Him and his family, the only spiritual man alive in the entire world. They're the only ones considered committed to God. You go to verse 8 and verse 9 of Genesis 6. Here's what Noah says. Here's what it says about Noah. Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This is right after he just talked about wanting to get rid of all humankind because he was so troubled about them. Noah found favor. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Now grasp that. The only righteous man alive. Not just righteous, but blameless, and walking faithful with God. And see, we look at this, and I don't want us to pass over this too quick to get to the part about building the ark and the animals and all the stuff we talk about. Remember, there's a world full of people only bent on their own pleasure, on their own self-satisfaction, on their own needs, and everything they want to do for them. Nothing to do with God whatsoever. And yet here's Noah and his family, and they're different. They're a standout among the whole world to God because they're different. See, and it's hard enough for us to be different in our world today. And all goes on around us. In fact, sometimes we tend to get too close to the edge, too close to that line, of what is okay for a believer, what's not okay for a believer, and we get as close as we can just to kind of test the waters. And we do that because, this looks like a lot of fun. I'll just get to here. God won't be mad if I get to here, right? Well, then, over time, the line gets kind of moved a little bit, and we step a little bit further into that, and a little bit further into and it's a struggle. Noah didn't get to that, but he never even tested the line. He was living blameless before God. And then God told Noah what he was going to do to the world. He goes to Noah, this blameless guy who's committed to God. In verse 11, it says, "Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight," as we just said, full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on the earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, "I am going to put an end to all people. For the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth." And look, we're not going to, and then he gives them the directions and instructions on how to build an ark. And we're not going to look at all that and how much gopher wood he had to use and how much, we're not going to look at all that today. We understand he built an ark that was big enough to hold 2 of every animal. Okay? It's crazy to think of this, the enormity of this project. All right? To hold 2 of every animal. And look, I don't believe Noah had a clue what an ark was, or maybe even a boat. I don't know. There had been no rain at this time. And history tells us there was a canopy and there was all these things. There had been no rain. So they'd never seen that before. They didn't understand what it would look like to flood the land. I'm not even sure if Noah lived near water. I don't know. All I know is God said, build this boat, this ark, this ship. And he got to it. He got on to work. And Noah, from that day on, was committed to doing what God had asked him to do. That was it. He was committed to do God's plan. Guys, he was already approximately 600 years old. Okay? They lived a little bit longer back then. 600 years old. He was an old man at this time, and God came and said, "I have a plan for you." And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Guys, I don't care what age you are in here. I don't care where you are spiritually in here, whether you're new to your walk or you've been in your walk with Christ for a long time. When God comes to you with a plan, no matter where you are in your life, follow his plan. You're never too old for God to have a new plan for you. You're never too young to say, "God can't use me." No, God can use every one of us in here. He was 600 years old. Estimates tell us it took him almost 100 years to build this ark. That's a long time. He was invested in following God's will and God's plan for his life. Because of why? His commitment to God. And God's plan for his life. Only Noah and his entire family were spared from all this flood that we know took place, while the rest of the world was destroyed. We live in a wicked world, guys. I don't know what God's got planned for us. It scares me to think about sometimes when we think about what's going on. We live in a wicked world. Noah, we now look, Noah the man, this is the kind of guy he was. So now let's look at our lives. Look at your life for a second. It's our next point. Let's look at your life. All right? We now know the story, we know what's going on. Now let's look at us for a second. How can we apply some of this stuff? There's 2 passages of Scripture we're going to read here. Psalm 37, verse 5 through 7, and 1 Corinthians 4, 1 through 4. 2 passages of Scripture that I think tells us what God expects from us in our relationship with him. Okay? Psalm 37 says, verse 5, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will do this." So get that? He says, commit your way, trust in him. That's what he tells us to do. Then he says, this is what's going to happen if you do that. Verse 6, "He will then make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord. Wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes." See, he says, look, I think Noah was living this kind of a life. He was committed to God. He was trusting in God. And the Bible says that's what we're supposed to be doing with our lives. Commit your ways to me, trust in me, and then he promises us rewards. And he promises us he's going to take care of us. And he says, don't worry about the world around you. You look at somebody who's evil and they're succeeding in their plans, don't look at them and get upset. He says, don't worry about that. Worry about you. Okay? Commit your way. Trust in him with your life. And then he's going to make your rewards shine like the dawn. Be still, he says. Be patient on the Lord. Does anybody in here have trouble with being patient besides me? Anybody? Okay. Man, that is a tough one, isn't it? We go through life, we go through junk in our life and stuff in our life, and we look at all this and we say, God, I've been committing, I'm trusting in you, but you're kind of being slow. He says, look, be still and wait patiently for me. Commit and trust. If we commit our lives, our plans, our families, our work, our play, all of it to the Lord, commit it all, and then trust in him, all those things he then promises us will come true. 1 Corinthians 4, verse 1 says this, this then is how you ought to regard us. This is Paul writing to the Corinthian church. He says, look at us as leaders. This is how you're supposed to look at us, as servants of Christ, and as those entrusted with the mysteries God has revealed. Verse 2, now it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. Paul says, I care very little if I am judged by you or by any human court. Indeed, I do not even judge myself. My conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. It is the Lord who judges me. See, Paul's not saying he's perfect. He says, I'm not innocent, but you know what? I don't care what you think. All that matters is what God thinks of me and how God judges me. And he's talking to this church in Corinth. He wants to make sure, first of all, to realize that as they look at him as a leader, that he's still a servant. He's not a God. He's not no, he's just a guy who's serving the Lord. He says, look at me as a servant. Then he wants them to realize that as a follower of Christ, we've been entrusted with a huge responsibility. As a follower of Christ, if you're in today and you're a follower of Christ, you've been entrusted with a huge responsibility. And that responsibility is we have to understand that we have a relationship with God the Father. All-knowing, all-powerful, all-seeing, all-everything God. That's who we have a relationship with. See, Noah had that relationship. No one else did. He did. See, along with that idea of us having a relationship, along with that relationship comes the idea of them being faithful to God. Just having a relationship is great, but you got to be faithful to God in all that you do and how you live your life and all the things that he's given us. And see, I think where the church struggles and a lot of believers struggle, it's the next couple of verses that he says, because then he goes into saying, look, it's not your right to judge those around you. We're to be a witness. We're to talk to people about Christ. We're to be trying to encourage them into relationships with Christ. We're not to be the ones that judge how they live their lives. It's not our job to judge them. It's also not our job to judge other churches and how they do ministry and how they do. That's not our job. That's God's job. See, Noah could have been very judgmental. Guys, there wasn't a single person around him that had anything going for him spiritually. He could have been very judgmental. And yet, instead of doing that, what did he do? He just followed God's plan for his life. So let's look at your life. If I was to ask you the question today then, where do you trust in God? Where in your life are you trusting in God? See, we live in a world full of stuff. We all have stuff. We have money. We have houses. We have cars. We have electronic stuff. We have all these things to take care of all of our problems and take care. So where do we actually trust in God? Do you do it at school, students? Are you doing it at work? Adults, are you doing it with your family? Maybe in your neighborhoods? I mean, where are you trusting in God? See, we could, in a lot of areas in our life, we want to succeed in areas in our life. We have to work hard sometimes to succeed at those things. But guess what? You don't have to work hard at these things. I mean, if you're in a relationship, you want to see it succeed, but you really don't have to work hard at it. You don't have to. You want to succeed at work? You have to get there, do what you need to do. You don't have to do that to succeed. You don't have to succeed. Maybe it's your hygiene. There's certain things you can do to make yourself smell better and look better, but you don't have to, right? See, All of these areas and more depend on what? You have to actually, you need to put forth effort. For those things to work and succeed, you got to put forth effort. You got to put forth care. You got to put forth concern. Yeah, when it comes to our relationship with God, a lot of times we don't do any of that. We show up, we get our stuff, our preaching in, our worship in, we go home, and that's it. The rest of our lives aren't affected by it. We push him to the side. See, when we look at Jesus Christ and we see what he did for us on that cross, and it comes to Christ in our lives, we know. If I was to ask the question in here, give me what should be your top 5 priorities in life. Well, we're in church. Jesus and God's going to be right up there, right? But truthfully, in our lives, we get so busy with everything else in our lives, with work and family and friends and this and play and this and whatever. And God and Jesus gets from here to here to here. I mean, because we just get so busy with everything else. What's your priorities in your life? The things you spend your time, the things you spend your money, the times you spend your energy on. Look back to the last week of your life. What are the things you did? What did you spend the most time doing in your life? Very few of us would say we spent the most of our time in the last week doing things for God or of God. We had to go work. We had to take care of our family. We had to do something with our car. We had to go play. We have all these things that we do. Where's God in that? Well, we squeeze him in on Sunday morning for about an hour, and then we go home and do everything else. That's not a priority. Psalm 37:5, remember, it says, commit your way, trust in him. If we're to analyze our lives this morning, we're probably not as committed to Christ as we should be. So what needs to change for you personally? Noah's life was dramatic. His family's life was dramatically changed. Why? Because he was committed to God. So the life challenge is this today. In a wicked world, and we live in a wicked world, we already talked about it, where are your commitments? Where are you committed? You committed to God anywhere in there or just on Sunday mornings? Where's your commitments? In a wicked world, where are your commitments? That's the question that we have for you this morning. So